I've been on the Green Foundation because Nuala asked me quite a while ago, and one of the things that I felt right from the beginning is that the Green movement tend to scare people but don't recruit them. And so everyone's worried about it like hell, but they just switch away from it because it's just so frightening. So what I had been part of is a successful project with Terenure Rugby, because a friend asked me. And so the thought was, what could we do to engage a South Dublin, pretty middle class, even though there's some very poor parts of Terenure, and engage people who wouldn't even think of coming to a meeting like this. And so that's really what we've been trying to do. And I'll just tell you a little bit about how we've gone about it, because part of it is, how do you engage the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, and everyone else in Terenure? What's happening at 2:30 is a match between Young Munsters and Terenure, and I want to go to it because they've been a huge part of getting this going. But one of the challenges is, how do you engage those sort of people who are just living normal lives? And I think we've done a few things that seems to be successful. So, but anyway, this is the Irish state on one page, created by my son. He works for a design consultancy called Zero G. And this is, you know, a little bit more detail. This is another little bit more detail. It was in the paper there last week, and they've done the map. And the state, the idea of the nation state simply did not exist about 400 years ago. And now it's sort of ubiquitous around the world. And when you look at it, and you look at this map, you think, oh my God, this is just a mess. It's run by people whose only interest is re-election, whose agenda is what can we do for our local community, or is it actually run by the permanent civil service who have other agendas, or are there a whole load of semi-state bodies and quangos and things who've been appointed by the people who are in power? Or, by the way, does it not matter a shit anyway, because there's 1% of the world who don't really care about the nation state, because it doesn't really matter to them, because they got 99% of the goodies and they'll only go to a place that doesn't tax them very much, which of course is Ireland, and other places like the Bahamas and, I don't know, Virgin. I'm not an expert on the matter, but so I guess where I'm coming from is, if I were you, a bit like the Irish farmer asked the direction to Dublin, I wouldn't start with the state. And if you don't start from the state, by the way, if you're doing things for the state and policy and want to get re-elected, fine. I'm just telling you where I'm coming from. And what if we started with some of the best of what preceded the state? And what if we started with a model that's based on community and tribe and built around voluntarism? And so really that's what I want to talk about. Now, Ireland is in an actually incredibly useful position in this regard, if you think that the solution is in everything else other than the state, for a peculiar fact of history, which is the Romans never got here. They never arrived in Ireland. And because of that, an oral, and this is significant, tradition of stories, and when you look at those amazing stories, because they're incredibly well preserved in Ireland, because the monks wrote them down. They did fiddle with them a bit, but they did write them down. When you look at the political and organizational thinking that's encoded within it, it's actually an incredibly sophisticated model of community-based organisation, which I personally have found really inspiring and really relevant. And I took out Irish citizenship there last year. It cost me 900 quid or euros, and I did because I thought, this is a place I feel at home. So I went in the room. There was about 2,000 people from all over the world, feeling incredibly grateful to become an Irish person. And you could feel the gratitude as the Garda band played It's a Long Way to Tipperary. But I was grateful too, because I felt at home. Because I'd grown up in India as part of a colonial tradition. My dad was working class Glasgow, my mum was upper middle class. There's no chance of them having gotten together if they'd met in England, but they met in India, so all was well. And I was sent back to be civilized in an English public school. And I didn't really like the process. So then you're a wandering nomad looking for somewhere where you feel at home. And where I feel at home is 5th century Ireland. So I paid my 900 quid and I become a citizen of 5th century, 6th century, 7th century Ireland. I don't know whether anyone else is, but I am. And I feel quite happy to be there. Because Greco-Roman thought is predicated on a linear, centralizing, hierarchical logic, and who you are and how valuable you are and what your identity is almost entirely predicated on where you are in the pecking order of the hierarchy. And it's a peculiar, prevalent starting assumption that actually permeates virtually everything. And the culture that I was a part of, British, is just unbelievably hierarchical, and it predicates obviously the military model, the church model, and an awful lot else. But when you look at medieval Ireland, you actually find a distributed power system. And when you look at their myths and legends, you find that it is brilliantly worked out and incredibly relevant to modernity. They did not believe that centralizing was a good thing. And what they basically believed in was the power of the community. And the first people to articulate it as the humble bagmen, who are the Fiabolic. Virtually nobody in Ireland knows this amazing mythological tradition of the mythological cycle, but these were one of the first people to come to Ireland. By the way, the Irish did not have a kind of out of the ground, we were created and the earth did this and the sun did this. The Irish people came from somewhere else. Cessa, the first woman to arrive in Ireland, went on a journey from North Africa that makes the Odyssey look like a trip round the duck pond. A woman leading 50 women and 3 men. How many people know Cessa? It is an unbelievable story of femininity. And if you think about that, she had all the wisdom of the world. She knew all the cultures of the world. This is the first person to arrive in Ireland, Cessa, with her lover, Fintan MacBochna, who lived for 5,500 years. He must have been knackered. But if you've lived for 5,500 years, you've seen a lot. You'd probably die of exhaustion by then. But anyway, the Irish people come from somewhere else and have gone from someone else. And if you look at the DNA, the Irish are that. And it's actually a global myth, because every culture of the world is now this. It's potentially a way of looking at the French and the Germans, and, we're all that. So potentially this Irish foundation myth, which is we're all people who come from somewhere else. And by the way, having been here, we went somewhere else. So it's either immigration or exile. So it's a brilliant foundation myth. And who were the first 2 people to come? The wise. Cessa and Fintan were the wise. By the way, he was a shape-shifting shaman. So he had experienced salmon and hawks. And if you can do that, you can get into other people's heads as well. And they came up with this brilliant organizational idea of distributed power. The 5th province. In Ireland, the provinces are called Cuiga. Well, if you're hot and Irish, what that means is 5, but actually there's only 4 of them. So what is the 5th? The 5th is the place of the center, Ishna, Tara. It is an amazing idea, because if you've got this distributed power system, you do not think of the center in the same way, because it's not about consolidation and control. It's about facilitation, storytelling, and inspiration. So the framework and the model is brilliantly laid out in Irish medieval literature. And if any of you are interested in it, look up bardmythologies.com, and if any of you are interested in part of articulating this, give us a shout, because I want to spend a bit of time next year in the Pearse Museum, of huge Irish historical significance, trying to move beyond the Cuchulainn myth, which inspired Porrig Pearse, which is fine if you want to boot the Brits out, but it doesn't actually help you once you've booted them out, because you end up fighting with each other and you have a civil war. So there's other mythologies barely known in Ireland, the king tradition. Ireland has an amazing tradition of kingship. What is at its core? A king should not use his power to benefit he and his own, which is exactly what doesn't happen. 1% of the world end up with 99% of the world. That is not following that tradition. So there's a wonderful king tradition, but if you're colonized, you're not going to tell king stories. So in Ireland, there's 2 mythologies, the king mythologies and the mythological cycle, which offer wonderful guidance and inspiration, including this amazing idea from the bagmen of ancient Ireland, the Fearbolg, the humble people with huge political insight. So, by the way, where do you find this? Look at biology. There's a guy called Grobstein, brilliant thinking, because what is the opposite of hierarchy? People think anarchy. No, it isn't. There's a way in the middle, which is a distributed power, self-organizing system, which is what the ants and the birds and the bees and the slime mold get. They know what's needed, and so insights from the biological world. So what did we do in Terenure? We ran a seeding event, because what it is about in a distributed power system, a friend of mine came to me and he'd come up with 20 projects. I said, tear it up, because it's come from the center. Use an idea from Arthurian mythology of round tables. You know, why is this room arranged like this? Because it almost gives, precedence to me. Why aren't we sitting at round tables? Because Celtic myth, Arthurian knights meet at round tables. And what is the principle at our round table? All are alike at the breaking of Arthur's bread. This room's arranged that you're all looking down with me as if I've got some sort of superior status. And anyway, you're listening to a talk rather than grow something out. So what do we do here? About 2 minutes of blah, blah, blah from me about the process, and then say, what are your ideas? So what do we do with the rugby club? 350 ideas came out, facilitated process. We began with storytelling. Within 2 minutes, when we got going with the rugby club, tell me how much you like Terenure. Within 2 minutes, they had tears in their eyes, talking about the day the boys went up, putting on the purple, white, and black, and all those sort of stories, my first day in school. They came down feeling, I'm pissed off with the executive and the club. Within 2 minutes, they realized how much they loved the place. And there's Niall Hogan, former captain of Irish rugby. And what happened is, the point is that the process, begin with a process and let it grow from within. Round tables, meet as equals, neutral facilitators. The point about the centre, it's a facilitative role, and then these brilliant ideas of the 5th province. What came out of it? 10,000 hours of volunteer time. And I believe we've delivered that. That is mobilizing something that does not fit in John's GDP. 0, nothing. Mind you, when we met and spilled a few pints in the club to celebrate what we've achieved, so the mobilizing of something that doesn't even get on GDP. So 2 nights ago, I was talking to the 87 rugby clubs in Leinster. What if they get together? Ireland has an amazing tradition of clubs and communities. So I was saying to them at the end of that, why don't you get involved in the Better Energy community? Keep the energy at home. Because I heard from a club in North Dublin, 13 of their people are increasing the carbon footprint by going off to Perth to help that mining iron ore. Keep them at home with non-imported stuff. 10,000 hours of volunteer time at €30 an hour, but we're getting it for nothing. 300,000 of value, and by the way, a lot of people in Terran Europe earn a lot more than that, for nothing, not even on the GDP. And what's happened is, we have turned the club around. Everyone in every Irish rugby club in the country is talking, how did you do it? Unbelievable. Now, it didn't matter that we had success on the pitch, but they know that there's something special going on in Terran Europe and in our local community. But it came from bottom up. It came from all these principles of distributed power systems that birds and bees and ants and slime moles get. Now, the issue is, it's one thing to get these people together and use storytelling and ideas generation and things. And what happens is they go away fired up. How do you keep it going? Not easy to keep it going, because hierarchy doesn't work in a club. You cannot use boss subordinate on your volunteers. Because if you go along and say, you said at the last meeting, you were going to deliver on an under-13s European rugby, you were going to deliver on energy, they say, I'm out of here. I've had enough of that grief during the week. I'm walking with my feet and I'm not coming back. And by the way, you won't see me for another 5 years because I'm pissed off with you. And by the way, I helped you out in a fundraiser 4 years ago and you didn't say thank you. So I'm not coming back. So the basic principle of ancient Ireland in the cult of the sacred centre, you have to praise the volunteers because you do not have any other currency but thank you, thank you, thank you, well done, well done, well done, over and over again, because if you don't, they won't with their feet, they're out of here. And by the way, if you're running something on a voluntary basis, you've got to run it as professionally, no, more professionally than you'd run it if you were being paid whatever you earn an hour to do it, because it's got to be slick, well run, meetings got to finish on time and run really tight. And what happens then is, how do you keep it going? Because they leave the room as high as a kite. They're buzzed on their happyometer. They came in pissed off with the club, and by the time they leave the meeting, they're ready to take on the universe, full of love and meaning, because the community in which they grow in, it means something to them. And why did it mean something to them? Because those bastards from Dublin 6 Mary's Rugby Club had beaten them by 60 points at all levels. They were like an alcoholic in the gutter. And now we had to rediscover the pride of the Noor, the purple, white and black. And how do you keep it going? The answer is in medieval Irish approach to time. They have a brilliant system based largely around the rural system, Imbolg, Bealtaine, Lunasa and Samhain. Now, what is that all about? It is 4 meetings during the year where you meet. And Imbolg, as you come out of winter, plant a few seeds. Bealtaine, first fruits. Then you move on, harvest, Lunasa. The fruits of your labours are beginning to come forward. Enjoy them. And then have a damn good party. And have a few pints of Guinness and add to the GDP of the Guinness brand. Or drink your own homemade mead, or whatever you're up to. Realise that the thing has died, have a bit of quiet stillness, and get the thing going again. So how do you implement this? Seeding, have these cross-functional self-organising projects which have people from all walks of life working together. Why does it work? It works not because of boss subordinate, but it works because they have made a commitment at the seeding event, not to me, not to the executive, but to their fellow community. They've made a promise. I will deliver on our energy project because we're turning on the lights, we can't afford them. So can we generate our own electricity on the clubhouse with some sort of PV system or something like that? And then the reason it works is not management push, but event pull. You have another meeting coming up and you say, you wouldn't believe project number one, what they're sucking diesel, they do, sorry, bad example here, they're sucking air and water and sun, and they are delivering unbelievable things, and then they think, oh shit, we've done nothing. So you're unapologetically using shame to get them to deliver, and they stand up at the next event, and the only kudos is you've actually done something. And we had one guy on project number 20 who'd done nothing. How do you get rid of a non-performing guy without embarrassing him? Because you can't have loss of face. We had a brilliant woman who said how you get rid of him. You go to him and you've got a list of 10 things he's got to deliver. And she said by the time you get to 5th, he'll have resigned. When we got to 3, he was resigned and out of there. And we had a real climate of achievement, seeding, first fruits harvest, an ongoing cycle working on event pull. So you can mobilize communities, but how you do it is a process that's deeply encoded in Irish medieval literature. And then what you've got, why not do this for 20 years? 10,000 hours a year becomes 100,000 hours. You have added nothing to GDP. Your community has worked like that. You can overestimate what you can achieve in a year and underestimate what you can achieve. So how have we done this now in Terranure? This meeting last year was incredibly useful to me because a wonderful woman called Hayley Farrell was at it, and she came up to me and she says, I can do urban design. So she got involved initially. She came up with a brilliant vision of how beautiful our Terranure village could look. Now she then had to go because she was doing a master's and she couldn't give all the time. But her mate was called David Jordan, who was a GDP expert. And what did he do is he told us how, not GDP, GIS. Sorry, John, GIS. What is GIS? He can investigate government databases and statistics and tell us really interesting stuff. What did he tell us? Terranure used 12 million quid of imported electricity every year. Now we're starting to talk about something that the good citizens of Terranure are interested in, because most of what has been presented earlier, it's too bloody complicated. It's too complex. But if you can tell them that your energy bill is going to go from 4 grand to 200, then they're interested. They are really interested. And by the way, if they can hear not some salesman from an energy company telling them, but another community has done it. So the statistics that David Jordan, who I met as a result of a networking event last year, this event last year, incredibly helpful, because in addition to the storytelling, he gave us some statistics. And he gave us statistics that people who wouldn't be engaged with the green thing were interested in. So we formed a team. By the way, some other incredibly people came out. Kate Ruddock works with Friends of the Earth. She's really interested in community. This lady, Roseanne Walker, doing a PhD and doctorate on energy refits on the incredibly inefficient houses we have in Terranure that are their energy level F and E. So she comes out, she's in Terranure, and she's going to help us. Free, nothing. And by the way, Trinity are now going to do a study in Terranure which gives scientific PhD validation from the Premier University about how we are saving energy in Terranure. So, Team Fondit, we put in an application to Better Energy. By the way, what did inspire us? The Aran Islands. Someone stood up and said, every house in the Aran Islands is retrofit. By God, that got the attention of every good citizen of Terranure. Wow, what does this mean? Some island off the west coast of Ireland. It turned out not to be true. But by then, everyone was hooked. they saw, bloody hell, well, what can we do in Terranure? Because the whole solution is reduce and produce. Reduce through retrofit and then produce. Now, the graph, so this is the GIS stuff. Our energy is rated less than D. Most people in Terranure, they might glaze if they look at that. But no, because what they want to know is, what's my house? What is my house? And the probability is they're E or F rated, which means that their energy spend is 3.5 to 4.5 a year. Are they interested in that? Of course they are. Because if they're moving to retirement and they can increase their disposable income by fueling their homes from renewable energy, that's a win-win. But what are they mainly interested? Saving the earth comes down the list. Saving money in my pocket, top of list. Because it means my less income in retirement, there's an awful lot more available. And by the way, we're doing it in renewable. And by the way, we probably formed a cooperative, which Ireland knows a lot about, because agricultural cooperatives, and we're all pally together. And by the way, we also have a farmers market, which is about recycling old stuff in Terranure. Huge success. Every Saturday, come to Bushy Park. Now, you might have to eat a burger, which is produced by a cow that's farting and doing whatever they do. But it's a farmer's market, which is what Terranure used to do. We also have a goal and vision, which Kate worked on, to go much better than the pathetic targets that the government have set up, which they're not going to achieve anyway because there's not much political will. We're going to endeavour to do much better than it. Here's the thing. This is the chart that made the difference. Because those good citizens wandering around the beautiful Aran Islands, by the way, go there. A fantastic place. We went there this summer because the minister was there, Alex White, and the head of SEAI. What is this saying? That by 2020, they will be down to a fraction of the energy uses in the Aran Islands. That is the slide that matters to the good system. Not quite, actually, because they then want to translate it into, what does this mean for me? So this is the community vision translated into a thing that they care about. My energy bill in Terranure, which, by the way, because of the price of fossil fuels, it'll probably be doubled by 2020. So I won't be spending 12 million, I'll be spending 24 million, which means that's 8 grand every year. Does that matter to me? Like hell it does. So when we had our meeting there last week, showing them this stuff, not all this incredibly complex things of interconnected systems, because it's too complicated. It's right, it's fantastic, but it's too complicated. And so this is the chart that got their attention, and what they then want is to see what has actually happened. Now, this is Roseanne's house, this PhD lady who turned out of the woodworks. They then want to know how is heat lost, and EnergyWise told us about it. Here is a case study. And what does it say? Energy saving of 3 grand. Yes, there is a cost. And here's another, saving a 1420, based on actual practical houses. I think some of them were from Cavan, and people say, yes, I get it now. My house, my energy bill a fraction, I'm interested, I'm in, and as a result of that meeting, another 50 houses signed up. Now, there's a sad end to this story, which is not dissimilar to the story you told, Bernie, which is SEAI promised us, we got verbal agreement that we were going to fund our 650,000. So we got the community behind that, and they saw fantastic achievement. We then had a meeting that SEAI came to. By the way, they've done everything that they can to help us, and we're signed up to a 3-year vision for them, and they're going to give training and everything. And I don't think, by the way, it was a sort of, you're on the next funding, and we believe we're going to get it by the end of the year. What we've now been told is they can't fund us, we have to apply again, and they can't fund us in the next round in early December. So initially I was furious, in part because my credibility and my team's credibility is seriously threatened because we were making promises and implications. But by the way, I wasn't the person who was helping us who put up 650,000 in a bank account that he had for us to even be in there. So I wasn't out of pocket. But it was more, here we are trying to do something and you're humiliating us in front of our community. But then I thought about it, what the hell's going on? An election's coming up in February. What the hell do we care about 2020 or 2030? We ain't even going to be in office. So let's do everything we can to put every available fund into anything that will increase the probability that we get voted in and this stuff in Terranure goes by the by. So I thought that's the game at the moment. And what I was going to do for about an hour, I was stomping around the room saying, I've had enough, I'm out of here, I'm sick of this bullshit, you've humiliated me in public, not just me, my team of 8. I got a fabulous team together. And some of them came from this event last year. And by the way, if anyone else is interested in helping us or being part of the network or writing it or getting into this medieval Irish literature stuff, because there's a brilliant model. And one of them is, this is another dark night of the bloody soul. You have to go through, and Bernie, your story's amazing, how many dark nights you've been through. But you just got up there like a Mexican jumping bean again and again and again, because it's what you have to do. But I don't think, so anyway, I'm getting a bit worked up now. But basically, here's another thing, thermal imaging. They love it. So our friend in Trinity's taking pictures of all our houses. Everyone's come around to see, what's my house look like? And you can't exactly pick it up as acutely on this, but basically, the house on the right's been insulated and the others haven't. So in other words, energy's pouring out of the house, so we can take pictures because they've got this wonderful thing. So the things we're doing to get the good citizens of Terranure interested in it is thermal imaging of my house, energy bills coming down, we could form a cooperative, and by the way, if we get it all right, not only will our energy bill come back, maybe we can make money from it. Except the vested power don't even want our bloody PV coming back into the system. So there's a huge issue of, let's say we put PV on every school and house in Terranure. You can't even get the stuff to go back into the system if we've generated the excess, so it gets wasted. So Kate and a few others are working on the white paper that's going in. So I think, follow these community projects, see what the hell happens with people like ourselves and Bernie, the systemic problems that come up, because I think we're at the front line. And we had John Ashton, who I met at another of these things, who was policy advisor to 3 UK companies. He turned up to the Terranure meeting. No one in Terranure knew who the hell he was. But the reason that he was coming, Duncan came along to interview John. When we said Duncan's coming along, they all turned up to view Duncan. So to see Duncan and be on telly. So get the Duncan Stewarts and things, get these events going, but help the people on the front line, like Bernie, who's a true hero and heroine, and help us, because we're having a go too, and see what the issues are on the ground, because I think we are at the front line, we are having some success, we're having huge disappointments, but we need pick-me-ups. And anyway, that's enough. That's enough.